The cool, recycled air of the control room hummed, a constant, low thrum against my eardrums. Outside, the great dish of the radio observatory, a colossal ear to the cosmos, stood silent under the indifferent gaze of a billion stars, collecting whispers from the void. Inside, bathed in the soft, emerald glow of multiple monitors, I was deep in the familiar rhythms of data analysis. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a well-rehearsed ballet of commands and queries, sifting through the galactic dust. For years, this had been my sanctuary, my crucible of understanding, the quiet pursuit of cosmic truths, mapping the universe, one faint signal at a time. It was routine, comforting in its predictability, a meticulous unraveling of the grand design. Today, I was tracing anomalies within the cosmic microwave background radiation, the universe's ancient afterglow. Usually, these were predictable fluctuations, echoes of the Big Bang, minor ripples in the fabric of nascent existence. My current project involved cross-referencing these spectral variations against known stellar nurseries, a task as precise as it was tedious. The data scrolled, an endless river of numbers and waveforms, each peak and trough a testament to some distant, long-dead star or a nascent galaxy. Then, a flicker. It was subtle at first, a deviation so minute I almost dismissed it as sensor noise, a phantom blip. My fingers paused mid-stroke. I leaned closer, my breath held. The line on the spectral analyzer, usually a chaotic scribble of cosmic static, displayed a momentary, unnerving order. A pattern, delicate yet unmistakable, emerged from the statistical din. It was a perfectly symmetrical, repeating waveform embedded within the background radiation. My brow furrowed. No known natural phenomenon could produce such a precise signature at these wavelengths. It was too clean, too regular. I isolated the segment, running a preliminary verification. The internal diagnostics reported all systems nominal. No equipment malfunction. My colleague, a lanky individual hunched over a neighboring console, glanced up, drawn by the sudden cessation of my keyboard's clicking. "Something wrong, Cole?" the colleague asked, their voice a low murmur against the room's hum. I'm not sure," I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "Take a look at this." I gestured to my screen. The colleague ambled over, peering at the display. Their eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "That's unusual," they offered, their tone carefully neutral, but I detected a hint of apprehension. "A coherent signal? In the CMB?" "Exactly," I confirmed, a nascent excitement warring with a prickle of unease. "And it's repeating. Not just a burst. It's woven in." We spent the next few hours in a feverish scramble, pulling the director from their office, isolating the coordinates, verifying the readings with every instrument at our disposal. The excitement was palpable at first, a thrilling surge of discovery. Had we found an impossible natural phenomenon? Or, even more profoundly, the signature of intelligent life on a scale previously unimaginable? The implications were staggering. But as the initial thrill faded, giving way to deeper, more rigorous analysis, the excitement curdled. What began as a scientific puzzle quickly transformed into a cold, gnawing dread in the pit of my stomach. The waveform, once merely unusual, began to defy every known principle of astrophysics. Its structure, when magnified, didn't just repeat, it mirrored, folded, and inverted itself in sequences that suggested impossible mathematical symmetries. We tried to model it, to fit it into established frameworks, but the algorithms choked, spitting out error messages. The data points, when plotted in 3 dimensions, hinted at geometries that warped and twisted space in ways that could not exist in our Euclidean universe. Imagine a cube that was simultaneously inside out, or a sphere whose surface contained infinite other surfaces. That was the sensation the data evoked. I stared at the screen, the repeating pattern now a hypnotic, menacing pulse against the vastness of the cosmos it supposedly represented. It wasn't just too structured to be natural, it was too structured to be possible. If this pattern existed, then the very foundations of the universe I had dedicated my life to understanding were fundamentally flawed. It suggested a reality not merely complex, but maliciously, incomprehensibly alien. The director, usually a bastion of calm scientific rigor, ran a hand over their bald head, their face etched with a confusion that bordered on fear. It's like the universe is trying to communicate in a language we can perceive. The signal wasn't just an anomaly, it was an affront. My ordered world, built on constants and predictable laws, began to fray at the edges. This wasn't merely a discovery, it was an infection, a seed of doubt planted deep within the bedrock of my scientific mind, promising to sprout into something monstrous. My ordered world, built on constants and predictions, had fractured. The radio observatory's hum, usually a comforting lullaby of data, now thrummed with a discordant anxiety that mirrored the chaos in my skull. The signal, that impossible, repeating pattern embedded deep within the fabric of spacetime, became my singular truth, eclipsing all else. I lived within its frequencies, tracing its impossible geometry across my screens, convinced that if I just stared long enough, hard enough, the universe would yield its secrets. Days blurred into a single, extended vigil. The scent of stale coffee and ozone clung to my clothes, a testament to the countless hours spent hunched over the control panel, eyes burning. My colleagues, once eager collaborators, began to keep their distance. Cole, the lead researcher, a man whose patience was as legendary as his intellect, had approached me one morning, his voice laced with a weary concern. "You look unwell. This anomaly. It's likely just a complex interference pattern, or perhaps a glitch in our new array. You need rest." I merely shook my head, my gaze fixed on the oscillating waves. It's not interference. It's a signature. A cosmic signature that shouldn't exist. A sigh, heavy with professional disappointment, escaped him. Your reputation, Cole, it's suffering. These are extraordinary claims, requiring extraordinary evidence, not just a feeling. He gestured vaguely at my cluttered workstation, littered with printouts covered in my frantic annotations, the same repeating pattern drawn in the margins like a madman's sigil. Take a break. Reevaluate. But there was no reevaluating, only deeper immersion. My professional life, once the bedrock of my identity, began to crumble beneath the weight of my obsession. Whispers followed me through the observatory halls, talk of stress, of burnout, of a mind perhaps too keen, too fragile. I felt their judgment, a cold, isolating wall rising between me and the structured world I once inhabited. The anomaly, however, was not content to remain confined to the radio observatory's screens. It began to seep into the mundane weave of my daily existence, a subtle, insidious unraveling. A corner of my living room, bathed in the afternoon sun, would suddenly appear to twist, its angles momentarily sharpening into something alien, before snapping back to normal the instant I blinked.
My coffee mug, left on the counter, would sometimes seem to shift, its handle momentarily facing the wrong way, its ceramic surface gleaming with an unfamiliar sheen.
These were not grand, theatrical gestures, but quiet, almost imperceptible blips in reality's fabric, each one a needle prick to my already frayed sanity. But they grew clearer, a low, resonant hum just beneath the threshold of hearing, a murmur that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. It wasn't language, not truly, but a sequence of pulses, a cosmic beat that resonated with the frantic rhythm of my own heart. Desperate, I turned away from the stars, towards the forgotten corners of human knowledge. The observatory. Library, a dusty sanctuary of forgotten theories and half-finished dissertations, became my new hunting ground. I burrowed through ancient academic papers, obscure historical journals, and esoteric texts, my fingers tracing brittle pages, seeking any echo, any premonition of what I was witnessing. And there, buried beneath layers of forgotten scholarship, I found them. This wasn't just an anomaly, it was a recurring nightmare, a cosmic tide that had swept over humanity before, only to recede, leaving behind shattered minds and a world subtly reshaped. The radio observatory, once a sanctuary of ordered thought, had become my cage, its massive dishes silent, accusing I turned towards a sky I no longer recognized. Days blurred into a single, extended twilight, marked only by the shifting shadows of the control room. The whispers, once faint, now clawed at the edges of my hearing, a constant, low thrum beneath the thrum of the cooling fans. My mind, a kaleidoscope of fractured logic, clung to one desperate conviction: to understand this pattern was to regain myself, to find the peace that knowledge promised, or perhaps, the oblivion it offered. I scavenged, my hands moving with an unfamiliar, feverish efficiency. Repurposed wires snaked across the console, connecting jury-rigged relays to the colossal array's primary receiver. A modified sensory deprivation chamber, once a research novelty, sat in the corner, its interior now a nest of repurposed electrodes and a direct feed to the signal. Sanity was a distant shore, receding with every twitch of my fingers, yet a profound certainty guided me. This wasn't madness, this was the next, inevitable step. The air in the chamber grew thick with the smell of ozone and my own fear. The electrodes, crude and sharp, pricked my scalp, a dozen tiny portals to the tempest brewing within the cosmos. I closed my eyes, the last vestige of the familiar world dimming. A single, trembling breath, then I activated the feed. It wasn't sound as my ears knew it, but a compression of all possible frequencies, a roaring current that bypassed the drum of my ear and vibrated the very bone of my skull. It was a pressure, immense and formless, pushing against the inside of my brain, distorting the architecture of my thoughts. Colors, impossible hues I had never seen, exploded behind my closed lids, not light, but pure, raw data, streaming in torrents. Geometries unfolded, not in 3 dimensions, but in an infinite recursion, shapes within shapes, patterns repeating and evolving with a terrifying, indifferent elegance. I was no longer Cole, the observer. I was the observed, dissolving into the current. The anomaly wasn't an object, not a signal from a distant star, but the fundamental texture of reality itself. It was the warp and weft, the living thread that bound every atom, every galaxy, every fleeting thought into an incomprehensible tapestry. I saw it not as a thing that existed, but as the process of existing. It had no will, no consciousness, no malevolence, it simply was. A cosmic pulse, older than time, indifferent to the fragile dream of consciousness it occasionally spawned and consumed. My mind fractured, not breaking apart, but unfolding. Layers of perception peeled away, revealing the raw, exposed nerves of existence. It wasn't a language, but a truth that bypassed words, a truth that showed the universe as an enormous, intricate machine, constantly self-assembling, self-dismantling, and utterly unaware of the microscopic life that mistook its fundamental operations for a grand design. I was a flaw in the fabric, a brief, anomalous flicker in a pattern that stretched beyond all conception. My sanity, once a fragile vessel, shattered into a million glittering shards, each reflecting a terrible, beautiful truth. The distinction between me and the pattern dissolved. I was in it, and it was in me, the boundary gone. My individual consciousness, a fleeting ripple, was absorbed into the tide. When the emergency shutoffs, triggered by a cascade of overloaded systems, finally cut the feed, I did not scream. I did not move. I lay suspended in the tank, my eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I was no longer Cole, the astrophysicist, grappling with an impossible anomaly. I was a vessel, irrevocably altered, brimming with a knowledge that had scoured away everything human. The world outside, the radio observatory, the very air I breathed, now felt thin, a transparent veil over the true, terrifying, indifferent pattern that pulsed beneath. I had sought peace, and I had found it, not in understanding, but in becoming a part of the incomprehensible. And in that, there was only a vast, terrifying stillness.